So let's animate our flour sack. In the previous two chapters we learned how to rig it. So let's learn how to do a simple walk cycle. That's usually a great place to start in the wild world of character animation. Before we start though, let's go over the mechanics of a walk cycle. There's a few key things to remember that'll get you set off on the right foot. That's a pun intended there. Um, so let's go over those mechanics real quick. Let me just go and view this image. So if I zoom into this guy right here, there's a few things we got to realize when we're animating a walk cycle. The first thing is the position of our hips. Okay, if you'll notice as the walk cycle goes right here, our hip is at a neutral height right here. Then it dips down, hence the down pose. Then it goes back up for our passing pose as our foot passes, our back foot passes our center of gravity here. And then our hips go up to the up pose, and then it comes back down to a mirrored contact pose. If you'll notice, the dark foot, back foot is now to the front instead of on the back here. So hip movement's very important, as is the placement of our feet here. With a strong foundation with our hips and knowing where to put our feet, we can create a good base for a great walk cycle for our flour sack here. So I'm just going to pull down here and expand. Alright, now we have a great timeline in which to start our animation. There we go. Let me just make it full screen here. Another key factor, a key mechanic to creating a great walk cycle is to pick a good beat or a cadence in which our steps, go up and down, our hips move. Picking a good beat for that is important. Notice how each of these main keyframes correspond to a keyframe in time. That's going to be our guide to creating this great walk cycle we're about to do. So on each frame 1, 5, 9, 13, all of these right here, all the major keyframes highlighted, we're going to have a key pose animated or keyframe for us. So keyframe, key poses on our keyframes right here. So let's just get into it. The first thing we're going to establish is a nice up and down for our hips. If you'll notice, these green and red blue bars, these indicate the height in which our hips should be for each given keyframe in our cycle here. So I'm going to switch over to my flour sack I've got rigged and ready to go. And I'm going to expand my keyframe to include all the way up to about frame 34. And we're going to jump back and forth between this image and our Maya scene quite a bit. So keep that in mind here. So this isn't exactly a bipedal human, it's a bipedal flour sack. So our poses won't exactly match up here, but what will match up is the height of our hips and the front or forward position of our forward or backward position of our feet here. So as long as we get those synced up with our diagram to our flour sack, we'll be just fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and animate our hips. Our hips are going to set the tone for our whole walk cycle here. Alright, so I'm going to grab my waist control right here. Waist control 001. And I'm going to go into my translation handle here, and I'm going to go and just give it a up and down movement across our keyframes that we need to. So on frame 1, it should be at our neutral height. So just so I can, have a little bit of room to play, I'm going to pull it down just a little bit, a negative 0.18 translation in the Y direction. This is going to be my neutral pose for my hips on all my contacts and passing positions here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and keyframe them on the correct frames here. So frame 1, 9, 17, 25, and 33 here. Okay, so let's do that. So 1, was it 5? It was 9. So let's delete that keyframe. Right click and delete. 1, 9, 17. Keyframe it there. And where's our next neutral pose? Look at that green line, our neutral hip position. 25. Keyframe it. and 33 for our last contact pose. And there we go. So our hips aren't moving at all right now, but that's okay. What we need to do now is, let's go ahead and place our hips at our down positions. So 5 and 21 are the ticket there. So we're going to bring our hips down on keyframe 5. And, well, wait a minute. My hips moved back up. I want that exact same height. Well, if I go back to frame 5, and this time I'm going to middle mouse click and drag to frame 21. See, frame 21, our second down pose. I'm going to keyframe it right here at our same down pose. So on frame 5, I have my hips going down. So now I'm going to middle mouse button click and drag to frame 21 and keyframe it. So let's go to our up poses next. So 13 and 29 are our up poses. So there's frame 13. Let's bring it up just a little bit, keyframe it. And what was that other one? Frame 29. Alright, middle mouse button click and drag so our hips don't change position. If I simply left button click and drag, I would lose that up position at 13. But by middle mouse clicking, dragging to frame 29, double checking frame 29, I can get that same up position. So what we basically have now is our hips nicely going up and down. And that's going to be our basic speed at which our sack's going to walk. Right now he's just kind of bouncing up and down like, yeah, I'm ready to start walking. So now we got to start moving the feet in the correct places. Alright, so diagram. Let's look at the position of our feet here. And for future reference, I'm going to call the right foot, as we see right here, our white foot, and our back foot, I'll call that the dark or black foot. It's going to be very important to tell the difference between these two feet. Okay, so right foot is the white foot, back foot or left foot is the dark foot, white and dark. All right, so our light foot is a little bit forward, and our dark foot's a little bit back. So let's go ahead and keyframe that right on keyframe 1. All right, here's our front foot. Let's bring him forward, and dark foot. Let's bring him back. All right. It's important to note, if we bring up our skeleton rig and go into wireframe mode, what we want to avoid with our IK handle is locking our knee. Okay, it's gonna, if we lock our knee and pull it past the point of no return, see how it doesn't bend anymore? That little bit of a pop is going to show up in our animation. So be mindful that you don't overextend your foot with this IK setup, otherwise it'll create nasty popping. So I'm going to bring it forward just a little bit, make sure there's still a slight bend in the knee. And you know what? I'm actually going to bring it in a little bit. That'll give me a little bit more room to create a forward step. So if I bring it in, I can pull it that much farther out without it popping. And we'll keyframe it right there. And we'll do the same for this foot. I've already pulled it back a little bit, but if we bring it in, alright, we kind of want to have it at the same distance. So I can even double check that in my channel box right here. So our front foot was at a 0.97 translate in the Z direction. So this should be negative. Or actually, I need to look at the Z axis, don't I? It's at a 0.45 position in the Z and the X axis. We should be at a negative 4.5. So thereabouts, close enough. You don't want to be too exact. So I'll keyframe this, and now we have the same kind of pose here. White foot forward, dark foot back. Alright, great. So what's our next keyframe we need to go to? Keyframe 5 is our down position. So let's see what happens whenever we slide our hips over to keyframe 5. And I'm going to go to shading and turn on X-ray joints so I can see my joints through my flour sack. Alright, so if we go to keyframe 5, well, we can already see our hips and legs are already in the same kind of position. We got a bend at our knee on the front and back foot here, and we have the same kind of effect going on here. So we really don't even have to technically animate our feet right here. They're already in the right position. Our IK rig is already working out for us. See how it's bending my knees automatically? So we get a free pass there. Awesome. So let's just go on to frame 9, And in this frame, our white foot needs to be pretty much vertical, and our back foot, dark foot, rather, back foot, dark foot, same thing, needs to come up a little bit. So let's go to frame 9, and let's just animate that. So there's my foot back, and what I'll do is I'll bring this one up, and see how I'm bringing it up a little bit and forward. Yeah, there's still going to be a slight bend in the knees. See right here, the skeleton should be straight up and down. But again, we're animating a flour sack. The most important thing to pay attention to is where the foot is. Okay? In this position, we want the foot to be kind of almost in sync, or in the same, I guess, distance as our front one. See how they're kind of both tucked away vertically up and down with our flour sack. So that looks pretty good. So I'm going to keyframe this at 9 and keyframe my other one at 9. So now we can already see that my flour sack is taking its next step. Alright, so what keyframe do we have to go to next? Alright, at keyframe 13, we now have my light foot coming back a little bit, and my dark foot, its leg is pretty much forward and almost ready to make contact. So let's copy that exact same pose in Maya now. So what frame was that? 13? Okay. So let's zoom on to 13, and we need to pull our front foot backwards, and we need to bring our back foot forwards a little bit. He's not making contact, but he's about ready to. So let's keyframe these positions. Alright, we can already see him ready to make his first step down. See, his hips are moving. Now we just need to get his feet in the right position. So at keyframe 17, it's basically a mirror image of or frame 1. Our light foot is now backwards, he's stepping off with this foot, and our dark foot is now forward. So let's do that in Maya. And there's a little trick. It's easy in walk cycles to make your character look like he's limping. This is caused from a few things. Not having your hips equally spaced out going up and down, or having your feet and your hips and everything being at different positions at the mirrored instance of the walk cycle. So as we can see in this diagram, our dark foot should be at about the same position as our white foot. See? Dark foot's right here, white foot's right here. Approximately the same position. How do we do that with such precision in Maya? Well, there's a little trick I've picked up. Shortcut, if you will. So if we go to frame 1, I know that I want my front foot now to be back here at the exact same position as my back foot. So with keyframe 1 selected, I'm going to middle mouse button click and drag all the way to 17. And if you'll notice, by middle mouse dragging in the time slider and not left dragging, see the difference? Middle mouse click dragging, it's not animating the figure. He pretty much stays at the same pose as frame 1. And that's going to be perfect, because at frame 17 now, if we move our front foot back in the same rough position as our back foot right here, and we can even go to a side view here if we need to, and just line it up just right, I now have basically the same position that we need. Alright, so if I keyframe that at 17, I now have my front foot moving back to the same mirrored position on 17. So let's do that for the back foot here, our left foot. So I've already animated our right foot coming back. Now I need to animate my front foot making that contact there. Alright, so if I go back to frame 1, middle mouse button click and slide all the way to 17. Alright, notice I don't have a keyframe on my left foot here. I'm going to drag my control forward and put it roughly in the same position right there, just matching it up. And I'm going to keyframe that now. So now at keyframe 17 and 1, because I middle mouse button clicked and drug and matched up our poses, now our feet are roughly in the same position but mirrored. A little trick there. Alright, I'll do that a few more times throughout the rest of our walk cycle so we can better understand that little trick I'm doing. Alright, so what's the next frame? 21. In the down position, our feet should have a little bend at the knee now. So at frame 21, with our hips coming down, it automatically gives us that bend. So again, we get another free pass for our feet on this keyframe. So let's keep on going to frame 25. Alright, there we go. Our hips are coming back up, and in frame 25, our feet and legs should be aligned vertically with our hips now. So instead of just kind of eyeing that again, let's use that same trick. Let's go back to frame 9. Alright, see how we have this passing pose? If we go back to frame 9, we already have the same kind of pose. See, our legs are kind of vertically aligned with our hips now. So at frame 9, I'm going to middle mouse button click and drag to frame 25. So hold down my middle mouse button and just drag it to frame 25. Double check. This is our next passing pose. Alright. So if I move my slider now, you'll see my legs jump to another position. See? That's because I left click and drag. See how it loses that position? So at frame 9, I'm going to middle click and drag to 25. And then I'm going to do what I did to get our mirror pose set up. I'm just going to go to my side view, and I'm just going to match it up. Okay? It looks like he's kind of floating now. So if I keyframe that foot, there we go. Now I'm going to go back to frame 9, and I'm going to grab my other foot, middle mouse button click and drag to frame 25, and then I'm going to match it up to this foot now. Alright, perfect. Keyframe that. And let's look at our results so far. Alright, looking pretty fluid. Alright, what's our next keyframe? 29. So at 29 we have an up position, and it mirrors frame 13. So let's use our mirror trick that we've been doing. So if I go to frame 13, I'm in the exact same position in 13. I have my dark foot forward and my light foot back. Pretty good. But I want to mirror this again. So we're going to middle mouse button click and drag to 29. Let's do it. Middle mouse button click and drag to 29. And we're just going to do the same thing here. I'm going to put my foot right here. Just match it up in the same position. Keyframe it. And we're going to go back to 13. This is our original up position. And we're going to do the same thing for the other foot. So let's grab that other foot now. Notice we don't have a keyframe yet for this second foot. And we're going to drag it to that position and keyframe that. Alright. We can already see our animation coming together. But he kind of hangs up. We got to do those last keyframe for our feet. But if you'll notice something, the last keyframe is a piece of cake. It's just a mirror image, or not even a mirror image. It's the exact same image as frame 1. Frame 1 and 33 are the same. Our light foot forward, our dark foot back. Okay, so another little shortcut. If I'm at frame 1 and I grab my feet controls, there we go, foot controls, feet controls. What I'm going to do now, instead of having to line them up exactly, well, I already have them at the position I want. I'm just going to middle mouse button click and drag all the way to 33 and keyframe it. So keyframe 33 and 1 are the same. So now my guy should be walking. So let's give it a look. We can go to show here and uncheck NURBS curves. We can go to shading and turn off X-ray joints. Actually, we can just turn off my joints in the rig here. I'll go to shading and turn X-ray joints back on in case I want to see my skeleton again. But with my layers set up in my rig layer, I can just hide it altogether. There we go. Now we have our flour sack taking a little stroll. But he's not quite done. I mean, how many people do you see walking around with their arms straight up in the air and their waist or chest not even moving? I mean, it takes considerable effort to take a walk like this. It's almost like he's trying to balance cups on his hands or a basket on his head or something. It's not very natural. So this is where the secondary motion principle of animation comes in. We need to add some secondary motion to his chest, his arms, so he can start, kind of lazily swaying in time. As we can see in our diagram up here, notice how the arms are kind of going back and forth here. And it's pretty common sense to know that with our light foot forward, our dark hand is forward. So it's kind of like the mirror image. Um, the right foot's forward, the left hand's forward. So before we do that though, let's pay attention to the twist of our body. Because believe it or not, your hips actually kind of twist in the direction that you're stepping. So we can even go back to our waist handle here. So let's go to show. Let's bring back our NURBS curves. And we can even add a little bit of twist in our hips here. So to do that, we notice that with our right foot forward here, our waist should be twisted just a little bit. So I'm going to twist it. And I'm going to animate on top of this frame 1 here. So I'm going to keyframe it. Alright. And with our next foot forward, we should, our frame 17, our mirror image contact, our hips should kind of follow our right foot. So there we go. But if you'll notice, it's not very fluid right now because we've already keyframed our up and down. So we need to go, and we're trying to keyframe rotation on top of it. So for our keyframes in between there, it's snapping it back and it's making it kind of twist unnaturally. So we kind of have to add a little bit of more of a subtle rotation there. Alright, and maybe our graph editor can help us with that. So with my waist control selected, what we need to do I need to look at my rotate Y value here, okay? And I want it to be really curvy. So if we go to a window and open up our animation editors, go to graph editor, and let's pick on rotate Y. Ugh, that's nasty. Look what's happening here. We have a dip and then flat and then dip. We need to add a nice, circular animation for this. So we're just going to adjust our curves here, and we're going to give it as a nice flowing curve as we can. Be sure not to mess with the keyframes too much. You don't want to accidentally pull it over here. We just want to move it up and down, okay? And we can even mirror image it over here, and we'll just bring this up. And if you want to be precise where you can't move it back and forward, you can hold down shift and you can only move it up and down. Shift will lock it in the original position that you're moving it. So I'm going to line it up with that. And actually I need to bring this one down, line that up. And this keyframe will go right there. We'll bring this one up here. And I think this one ends up kind of right there. So notice our rotation now has a nice curve to it. Let's see if that helps our hips sway. Oh, great. Look at that. Now our waist is rotating perfectly. We got a nice secondary motion on our hips. And our walk cycle is a little bit more believable. Okay? So let's pay attention now to our chest. We want to add a little bit of impact on our chest, kind of a cause and reaction. So we kind of want every time we take a step for him show his chest to kind of follow along with that step. Okay, so we kind of want to adjust the X rotation on this. All right, so what rotation goes up and down? The X, and we'll start this basically on our downs, because when he comes down, that's when we want our chest to kind of come down too. Alright, so we'll keyframe that. So see how I just brought my chest down on our down pose? And where's our next down pose? Was it frame 19? Well, let's check the key. Frame 21 is our next down pose. And what was our rotation over here? 12? Well, notice how it doesn't change. Alright, so great. Since we don't have any other keyframes for our chest, it's not really animating. So great. Let's go to frame 21 in our down. And since it hasn't really changed, we'll just keyframe it there. What we want to do now is when we go on our up pose, we kind of want to bend the chest back a little bit like he's puffing his chest out. So at frame 13, let's bring the chest up a little bit. Alright, great. And at frame 29, let's go ahead and do that too. So I'm going to just middle mouse button click and drag to frame 29. And I already have the chest where I want it. Alright, but we're running into a little bit of an issue. Alright, we don't have keyframes for our chest on 1 and 33. And I think 1 and 33 should be kind of neutral poses. So if we just go into the rotate X and make that 0, we'll just do that at 1, middle mouse button click to 33, and there we go. See how the chest is kind of reacting to the step? He takes a step and he kind of hunches. Hunch, bow, hunch, bow, hunch, bow. That's great. Good secondary animation right now. Alright, but now the arms are a bit of a problem. They're not really swaying in time. So what do we know about the arms and their position? Well, if this foot's forward, then this arm should be back. So let's just rotate this arm back. And I'm just going to kind of eye this one. So there we go, that arm's back. But this arm's forward. Alright. So I'm keyframing as I pose them. And I know I want this exact same keyframe at the end because 33 and 1 are the exact same pose. So right now we kind of have the arms just in this manner right here. Well, let's go to frame 17 and let's just mirror this, okay? So you can do the same thing here. You can kind of go to frame 1, middle mouse button click and drag to 17, and we can kind of go in and rotate this arm a little bit forward in the exact position. Arms are going to be a little bit harder to do this with. Actually, there we go. Maybe back a little bit. I don't know. If you want to be picky, you can always, look at your keyframes there or your channel box values right there. But I think that'll be good enough. And in fact, I'm just going to eye it in general. Add a little bit of variation to this. There we go. And if you'll notice, there's a little bit of hesitation in our cycle right now. Well, if we take our little scrunch bar right here, that's what I'm going to call it right now, and set it to the keyframe right before 30 to 33. So let's say 32. Now we can see our animation working seamlessly for us. And, our arm motion may not be precise, but, it's an organic guy. He's just a flour sack taking a little stroll. If his arms aren't going to move mirror perfect image, that's secondary motion. It's just the way it works. So, great. Let's go over what we've done. We've made the hips go up and down. We've positioned our feet at the correct places according to our diagram here. We've gone to our hips and rotated them a little bit using our graph editor so that they twist with each step. We've added a little bit of secondary animation with our chest, so every time he makes contact, he kind of comes down, and every time he's in the up position, it kind of rotates up. See how our chest is going up and down right now? And of course, our hands, basically if our left foot's forward, our right hand is forward. If our left foot's back, our right hand's forward. Did I just say that? Well, you get the idea. It's, opposites. Boom, 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 boom. Alright, so what we can do now is I can actually animate him walking forward a little bit. But before we do that, what happens if you want to have your character walking for more than just 33 seconds? Well, let's increase my total time of my keyframe bar to 200. That'll be good, whatever. Alright, and I'll just drag it all the way there. So I'm going to go to frame 1, and I'm going to select all of my handles here. Okay, and we can see here I have these nice evenly spaced out keyframes, and every keyframe has a different pose for my flour sack. It's a well-oiled machine. So what we're going to do is, starting at frame 1, I'm going to hold down the shift key on the keyboard, left click and drag, and you should see this red bar. Okay, and we're going to make sure that red bar goes past our last keyframe. So with that red bar, and I've released shift by now, so it's just I'm stuck with a little red, slider bar here. So this red slider bar says every keyframe in here, I'm going to do something to you. What are we going to do? Well, with my inside my red bar, I'm going to right click and I'm going to copy. All right, and now I'm going to position my keyframe slider here directly on frame 33. I'm going to right click now and paste. So basically, we've just copied and pasted our keyframes in our time frame right here. All right, let's do the same thing. Let's extend it even more. Instead of make 4 steps, let's make him make 8 steps. So I'll walk us through it again. Starting at keyframe 1, I'm going to hold down Shift and drag. You could drag all the way over here if you wanted. Just make sure you start at keyframe 1 and encompass the last keyframe. And I'm going to copy this. And the key here is to go right back to the last keyframe we have marked. And I'm going to scrunch this up just to make sure. See how it's easier to see the keyframes if I scrunch it up. And I'm just going to paste this again. And now my guy should walk. And you can keep doing this for however long you want. Alright, now we got him walking for 200 frames. It's seamless. There's no limp. We've used, a set standard of instructions to get a nice balanced walk cycle. If you start noticing your flour sacks limping or not, looking a little weird, well, there's a good chance you didn't perfectly mirror the positions or your keyframes aren't evenly spaced out. Alright, so now all that's left to do is just make him walk forward. So we'll just grab our translate handle here and we'll keyframe it at the initial position it's in. So keyframe it right there at 1. And then we'll actually just move him forward a little bit and then keyframe that. Alright, so let's see what we got. I'm going to go to Show, hide my curves, and hopefully we'll see my flour sack walk toward the camera. And there we have it. A nice walking flour sack. Oh, looks like I didn't make him translate enough forward. See how he gets to here? He kind of just walks in place. That's a simple matter of going back and let's look at my dope sheet. Alright. Animation editors. Dope sheet. So here's my translate. Alright. That's just a simple matter of, let's select our waist and our translate. So here's my waist and here's my translate. Notice how for my translate control, I'm just a few keyframes away from the end of my hip cycle there. So with my move button selected, alright, I'm going to select them over here and I'm just going to middle mouse button click and drag right on top. So now the keyframes are matched up and he should keep walking at us without stopping in place. Alright, let's see if he works. And he's just strutting, he's about to go buy some milk. Alright, great. Oh, well, what's going on here? I thought we fixed that. I think the curve editor can help us now, because I think my curve for going forward in the Z direction is leveling off a little too much. So let's go to Window, Animation Editors, Graph Editor, and let's pick up our Translate Z. Yeah, see how it's starting to fall off here? So I'm just going to grab my handle and I'm going to bend it just a little bit. So now it's like a straight shot. And now he keeps walking forward and doesn't ski in place. Well, now he's ramping up a little bit slower. So let's go back to my graph editor and just make sure the point is straight. And let me see. What is this one? Linear tangent. Well, we want just a straight line from here to there. We don't want to curve at all. We want him walking at the same speed the whole way. So I'm just going to select both of these keyframes here and just hit linear tangent. And that should do it. Now he's walking at the same speed forward, and he's good to go. You know, I'm liking this. Flour sack is walking, everything's good. So that does it for our walk cycle. Use these basic principles. Well, let me slide that back. There we go. Use these basic principles of animation here, secondary motion, anticipation, slow in, slow out, all the stuff that we kind of covered in this lesson, whether we were aware of it or not, to go ahead and now we have him walking forward a little bit. Now, at the end of our walk cycle, let's change his attitude a little bit. Kind of right now, he's just kind of, neutrally walking. So let's do about a few more seconds of a totally different emotion. Maybe he's sad and he kind of slowly walks with his head hung low. Maybe he's excited and kind of jumps a little bit as he was walking, or maybe he's trying to get somewhere fast and he starts taking off into a sprint. I'll leave that up for you to decide and figure out how to animate. I'm open for questions if you have any concerns, and good luck animating. Thanks.